Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 6th meeting of the Planning and Environment Committee. The City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for council, standing or advisory committee meetings and information upon request. To make a request for any city service, please contact accessibility@london.ca or 519-661-2489, extension 2425. To make a request specific to this meeting, please contact pec@london.ca. So I'd just like to advise committee members that the mayor will not be attending this evening. Councillor Turner will be a few minutes late, and we have an early departure of 5:25 for Councillor Hillier. Moving on to number 1, disclosures of pecuniary interest. Are there any? I see none. Moving on to consent items. I want to bring to the committee's attention that 2.2, the draft Victoria Park secondary plan, there is a summary attached as a staff presentation for your information. And I would like to proceed and ask if there's any consent items being wished to be pulled. With that, I see Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I hope to ask some questions about 2.3, which is the previously known as the European gypsy moss, but that plan, I don't necessarily need to pull it, but I would hope to ask a couple questions about that. Thank you.
Thank you for letting me know. I'm looking for a motion from committee members to put all the consent items on the floor. Councillor Lewis, seconded by Councillor Hillier. And with that, I would like to go to any questions from the committee. Councillor Lehman.
Thank you. I just want to speak to 2.3. As I know Councillor Van Holst wants to. Our wards are affected by this infestation, as I know Councillor or Chair Hopkins' ward as well. In the Oak Ridge area along the Thames, we've been under siege now for, oh boy, going on, I'd say our 4th year, which is really long for this type of cycle to happen. So I just want to thank staff for being on top of it and planning again for what we're going to do in the spring and the summer. Residents have been extremely vigilant in doing what they can for their personal trees on their property, primarily with wrapping their trees and doing what they can with the larvae, et cetera, before they go full bore. The staff, it's a continuing fight, not just here in London, but across Ontario. So using best scientific practices with regard to the environment as a whole, I think the city's on the right path here. But vigilance will have to remain high, both from the city's perspective and from our residents. So I look to the city to do what they can from their perspective, but also providing lots of education for residents and for ourselves on council to pass on to our specific areas and our wards that are affected by this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lehman, for those comments. I'll go to Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this was an item of great interest to me because we had a big infestation right in my neighborhood as well. I see that we're going to be doing 2 sprays instead of just 1 in this area, which I think is great. I also noticed that things seem to have spread at the end of the season over the railroad tracks into Kiwanis Park, where there's some very large oak stands. And it seems to me that had we sprayed a little further than the expected infestation, that we might have been able to stave off some of that. So I think there's probably an opportunity to do that again. So I wonder if through you to staff, I can ask if there's any other areas we're anticipating spraying, so that the infestation doesn't expand to other likely places.
Thank you. And with that, I would like to go to staff. If there's someone here from staff that can speak to any other areas that we will be spraying in our city.
Thank you, and through the chair, I will defer to Jillian Spence if she's on the call, but I don't see her name right now. But I will see if I see a couple of names, and I'm not sure if it's her. So I will just check to see if she's on the call. If not, I will address that.
Mr. Stafford, I think she is here.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Ms. Spence?
Yes,
Welcome.
thank you.
Thank you.
There's quite a few of us here today. Yes, through the chair, the other parks that we are proposing to aerial spray this year, Fairmount Park, Fairmount Park, Somerset Woods, Forest Hills, Woods, Springbank Park, just the far western loop, and the Thames Valley Golf Course are the parks we're proposing to spray this year.
Councillor Van Hulst?
Yes, thank you. I might suggest the Kiwanis Park near the new playground that's got a very high concentration of oaks, and I noticed that they were there last year too. Next question, Madam Chair, is are we going to be scraping the egg masses again? And also, I noticed that there was someone up north, I was reading in Northern Ontario, that was using essential oils to spray the egg masses and had come up with something that would kill them. And if we had something like that, because it seems like spraying them, the egg masses might be easier than actually trying to get up and scrape them.
If I can go to Ms. Spence about spraying the eggs as opposed to just scraping them.
Yes, through the chair. Yes, that's definitely one of the management techniques that we use to manage the pest. In regards to spraying the egg masses, what we're using is BTK, which is a bacterium. It's naturally occurring in our soils, but I've seen other products used, such as dormant oil, which is basically a soapy, high concentration of soap that would be an option for residents to use. I plan on updating our Get Involved webpage on types of management techniques our residents can use. Good suggestion.
Thank you. I did notice that the spraying that we did in Fairmount Park made a big difference. So there was the trees in that little woodlot had much decreased incidence of the caterpillars. However, it was around near the edge of that. There were trees in the Catholic school adjacent to it. Their trees were attacked, and then many of the neighbors. Is the spraying of the BTK available for residents along the street, or can we do that on the boulevard trees where we saw a lot of the EGM?
Ms. Spence, if I can go to you about BTK being sprayed by residents and our boulevard trees?
Yes, through the chair. Residents are able to contract with private tree care companies that offer that service to, they can use backpack sprayers for applying the product. And we are this year, in addition to doing the second aerial application in and around Fairmount Park, we will be also performing egg mass scrapings throughout that entire area. It was noted last year that it appeared that the caterpillars were on adjacent properties and along our street trees there, but the Fairmount Park is extreme. It is very unique at how significant that density of pest is. So we're concerned and using all tools available to us to manage that pest specifically in Fairmount Park.
Councillor Van Hulst?
Yes, I also wanted to ask about the sticky tape. It was suggested in there that sometimes I found that to be extremely effective. And Madam Chair, I actually waged a personal war for about a month, and doing some experiments. What I found is that even a thin strip of sticky tape stops them from going up the tree, and then you'll get this almost carpet of bugs around the tree, waiting to go up. And I would suck those up with a handheld vacuum cleaner, and then squash them. I estimated about probably squashed 100,000 over the course of over a month, looking at a number of trees. I found the trees that I got to early were not defoliated. I found the ones that I got to late ended up getting defoliated, but grew another batch of leaves. And there was other trees I didn't get to, and they were defoliated and never grew anything back. So I would say that if the residents do take on cleaning the trees of those caterpillars, they can definitely make a difference in that. But it looks like we were suggesting that maybe that's not a good idea, because things like birds could get stuck to it. I never saw any incidents of that in this neighborhood as I went around to the trees. Did we actually see something like that happen in London? A bird stuck to a tree?
Yeah, Councillor, I'll go to Ms. Spence to answer your question about the sticky tape.
Yes, through the chair. Yes, we are not promoting the use of the sticky tape just for those reasons. The caterpillar gets stuck in the sticky tape, and it becomes an attractive to birds and other things that may eat the caterpillars. We did have an incident or an example 2 years ago of this as a possibility. It wasn't confirmed that it happened, but we were also given information from the ministry about, that these types of, management techniques can also affect species at risk, such as certain snakes. So it's just something we're not promoting. There's lots of other options. The burlap is also very effective. I understand that it is a product that is promoted, but it's not something that we're going to encourage our residents to do.
Thank you, Ms. Spence. Councillor Van Hulst?
Okay, thank you. I think that's it. I hope that we're put a lot of effort into it. It's it's certainly discouraging for the residents who have got big trees in their yard, and they're just constantly rained upon by caterpillar feces. When it does rain, the sidewalks get very slippery. It's quite a disgusting infestation. So I hope we can make a dent in this. My last question is the idea of the population collapsing. So we seem to think that after a while they just go away, and that might be happening. What evidence did we have that this thing may be abating itself?
Ms. Spence, about the evidence that we've managed to gather up about the reduction of the population.
Yes, through the chair. Yes, we do believe that the Byron area is collapsing. How we make these determinations is we've been collecting data over the last 3 years on egg mass size of all things. And that provides us a lot of information. So egg masses, if they increase in number and increase in size, show that the population is growing and healthy. We have measured last year, we were able to get some really good information that that's in fact is what's happening. And the outbreaks normally last between 2 and 4 years. There's also what ultimately will cause the population to collapse are natural predators. And this is why we have to balance, how we do the aerial spray. Because one of the main factors that does influence when the population collapses is a virus that's present in the environment. And this virus is completely dependent upon the population density of the pest. So the more we see that virus, which is symptomatic, you'll see caterpillars that are V-shaped, hanging upside down. That's very symptomatic of this virus building up in the population. And those are, the last year we saw a lot of that. So that's hopeful that the population's collapsing.
Councillor Van
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, thank you. Well, that's interesting. V for virus. And now, are you calling the virus a predator? Just so I understand, because I thought there were no predators to this species, which is why it's so difficult to control.
So your question to staff is the virus a predator?
Well, yes, Madam Chair. So staff said we rely on predators, and I didn't know if there actually is a predator, or if
Okay, I'll go to
Spence
staff.
was referring to.
Ms. Spence?
Yes, it's a virus, so I'm considering it a natural predator, but there's also a fungus that also builds up in the population. And there's also predatory wasps that affect the eggs too. So there's a series of natural predators that will cause this pest to collapse.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yep, thank you,
Madam.
Councillor, for your questions. Any other questions on 2.3 from committee members? If you allow me just to make a few comments from the chair, given that there's a number of issues in Ward 9 when it comes to we now call it the LDD, and we have got some good news in the management that the city has undertaken for the past couple of years, where we've seen the numbers reduce, especially out in the West End. I do have a couple questions, because part of our management plan is communication. And I did notice that we are no longer referring to the European gypsy moth. We are calling it LDD, which stands for Lamentia dispar, because that's Latin, and excuse my Latin. But I think it's really important that we understand it's one and the same. And I would like to ask staff the question about the name change, as well as areas that we do not manage, like ESAs, and how the public can reach out and who to when it comes to management of our ESAs when it comes to the LDD moth.
Madam Chair, I can start with the name change. There's a growing acceptance in the entomological and scientific community to use LDD instead of the previous name, because the middle word of that name is considered a slur against a minority racial group. We will make sure, however, in our communications as we go through that transition, that people are aware this is the same pest as we phase out the use of EGM. We had gone from using European gypsy moth previously to EGM last year, and LDD seems to be the growing point of consensus in the pest management and scientific community. With respect to the ESAs, I believe Kevin Edwards is on the line, and he can speak a bit about ESA management, as his area runs that. So Mr. Edwards is probably the right person to answer that question.
Thank you, Ms. Scheer, for that information about the name change. And if I could go to Mr. Edwards about the public reaching out to their concerns when it comes to the LDD moth and in our ESAs.
Yeah, so thank you, Madam Chair. So yeah, ESAs are a little bit different because the policy is to protect them in their natural state. So, and it's typically the same approach that's used in the Ontario provincial parks. So, and given the biodiversity and potential risks to other caterpillars, the focus here is really on, we'll say, egg mass scraping. So Upper Thames, we contract them to manage the lands. And actually, I was just talking to them last week. So for example, in Warbler Woods, they scrape 2,000 egg masses alone. And they're also focusing on Westminster Ponds as well as Pottersburg over this year. That's the focus over the winter time. In terms of outreach, if there are concerns, typically what happens is if it comes in through Service London and comes directly to the ecologists here, and then we manage it from there.
Thank you for that information. It's important that the public understand the difference between the ESAs and our parks and how we manage the LDD moth. With that, I see no further questions on 2.3. I am going to go backwards to 2.2, which is the tabling of the Victoria Park Secondary Plan. We are just tabling, and we will be holding a future public participation meeting on the secondary plan. I do have the councillor of the ward, Councillor John Fife Millard, here to just ask a question or make a comment. Welcome, councillor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And through you, I just wanted to take an opportunity, number one, to thank staff for the report coming out. I think, as you said, this report's here in front of us now to be circulated for public comment, which I think is really important. And I think with that, one of the things that I want to acknowledge is the fact that Victoria Park is a park that's enjoyed by all Londoners. And so we're looking to get that public feedback back from all Londoners on the park and on the future of the park. We recognize that there's a balance between a growing urban lifestyle in our downtown core and a park that's very near and dear to so many people. And so I just want to urge Londoners to take the time to supply some feedback on this, because it's going to give us exactly what we need at the end, and I think that's really important. So thank you for that. Thank you for allowing me to make some comments.
Thank you for attending. Any other comments from committee members on this Victoria Park Secondary Plan? See no other questions. If the committee will allow me, I do have a quick question. I appreciate the councillor's comments around having enough time for the public to understand the changes, and I would like to ask staff when we can anticipate the future public participation meeting. Just a question to staff.
Thank you. Through the chair, as you mentioned, this is the information report to table the revised Victoria Park Secondary Plan. We are expecting the public participation meeting and adoption later this spring. So to allow enough time to issue statutory notices for the PPM and to allow the public enough time to review the plan and formulate comments.
Thank you, Mr. De Kooster. And I see Councillor Van Holst, you have your hand up. Is this on 2.2?
And yes, on the Victoria Park Secondary Plan, I had a couple questions about some of the public engagement items. There is a table of things. Is this a good time to ask those questions, Madam Chair?
Do you have a specific question? Because what we are doing this evening, we're tabling the draft secondary plan, and we will be holding a future public participation meeting on this. So I'm not exactly sure what your question is, but this is more or less about making comments. We are tabling it.
Okay, well, if the other committee members aren't making comments, then I won't either. I can certainly follow up with staff on some of these, but if there was going to be a dialogue about it, then I would participate. So I'll leave it, Madam Chair, to you and the committee.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. This is a consent item, so it's really here for the tabling and for our information as well, with the future public participation meeting happening later on in the spring. And with that, I see Councillor Turner.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just really quickly through you. I recognize this is, I think, our third attempt at this one. And so I'm thankful that a lot of the input and concerns have been considered through this. My question is just kind of the path forward from this. So we go back to PPM, the PPM and community circulation helps to inform this process. It gets brought back to us at PEC, and then we consider adoption or not. What elements are in place, I guess, to help have the best chance of success in this? It's been a long road. I'd like to see us be able to move forward. I know there's a lot of pressures within the area, and we need to land on something. What happens if well, one, what are the ways we're trying to make sure that this is as successful as possible, and two, what happens if we make no movement, and do we default back to the area policies that are in place right now, or do we continue to do kind of peace planning where we're looking parcel by parcel and having them appealed as we go on in perpetuum?
So that's a bundle full that I would ask staff just the pathway forward for the success of the secondary plan, and what is the default? If I could go to staff to address those questions.
Through the chair, this is Britt O'Hagan speaking. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. Yes, Councillor Turner, really, this plan is a framework that looks comprehensively at the policy framework around the whole park and would guide any future development applications. As we've seen, there have been some development applications that have come forward already and have various stages of approval, but if the plan was not to be adopted or in place, then it really is a consideration of individual applications as they come forward under the planning framework that applies to them. So whether that be the London plan in most cases or the 89 plan, depending on what policies and place types are under appeal at the time that an application comes forward. So this really does consider all of that framework and provide a new comprehensive way to move forward. But if it was not to be adopted, then it would be just evaluating individual applications on a site-by-site basis.
Thank you, Ms. O'Hagan. Councillor Turner.
Oh, that's helpful. Thanks. Hopefully the community engagement process is helpful. The PPM will help us as well, and I hope we were able to find a path forward in this, because it's been a long time. But I certainly appreciate all the work and effort that staff's put into it. It's certainly not reflective of staff. It's more reflective of the challenges in meeting all the interests of all the stakeholders, and that's not an easy road to map. So I appreciate that. Thanks.
Thank you for those comments. And with that, we have a mover and a seconder on all the consent items, and if we can proceed to vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Moving on to our scheduled items, 3.1 is a public participation meeting for 3524 Grand Oak Crossing. I'm looking to open up the PPM. Councillor Turner, seconded by Councillor Lehman.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
We have, if I can go to staff just for a very quick verbal.
Hello, this is Michael Clark, through you, Madam Chair. So this is a plan of vacant land condominium on a block in a previous approved plan of subdivision, the Silverleaf subdivision. It's half of the block within the subdivision. So this is the vacant land condo will have 23 single attached dwellings, and they'll have a shared access to Park Road and Grand Oak Crossing through a common element. The common elements will be shared with an adjacent standard condominium, which will have 35 townhouse dwellings. And it'll share both that private road as well as other common elements, including visitor parking, a mailbox, pumping station, and other services and open space. The vacant land condo concept plan is on page 153 of the agenda. And then you can see the combined site plan for both the vacant land and the standard condo on the following page, page 154. The draft plan of subdivision and the official plan and zoning bylaw amendments for this block were approved in early 2016 to permit medium and low density residential uses on the subject lands. Those permitted uses include the single attached dwellings within the vacant land condominium, as well as the townhouse dwellings in the adjacent standard condominium. All the uses and densities proposed in these lands were approved through those previous applications. The vacant land condominium just requires another public meeting because it's similar to a subdivision and then it's creating new parcels, which are served by a private road instead of a public road in a subdivision. There's no public meeting required for the adjacent standard condominium, as that's really just creating the ownership mechanism for those units. The applicant's also proposing a common elements condominium to manage the ownership of the common services that will serve both the vacant land and standard condominium. I'm available to answer any questions if council has any.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Any technical questions from committee? See none. I would like to go to the applicant. The applicant is here. I don't see the applicant being here. I would like to now go to the public. Is anyone here from the public that would like to make comments? I see none. I will ask one more time if there's anyone here from the public that would like to make comments to the recommendation. And with that, I will go to committee to close the public participation meeting. Councillor Hillier is moving it. Councillor Lewis is seconding.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
With that, the recommendation does call for any information that we have heard at this meeting with respect to the application for the draft plan of vacant land condominium relating to the property would be directed to staff, and that's the recommendation advising the authority. And I'm looking to committee members to move. No comments. Councillor Lewis to move. Councillor Lehman. Are there any comments from committee members? I see none. If you allow me to speak from the chair, this is a application in Ward 9 in the Silverleaf subdivision, and I do know it was a little confusing for the public to kind of understand the difference between the two condo units. that are already proposed through the subdivision agreement. And this one being, like staff said, that it's the land and the unit itself is owned, and therefore we need a public participation meeting for that. And with that, happy to support the recommendation going forward. If we can proceed to vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
So 3.2, which is a public participation meeting for 600 Oxford Street West. I'm looking to open up the public participation meeting. Councillor Lehman, seconded by Councillor Turner.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
I would like to go to staff for a very brief verbal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This application is for 600 Oxford Street West. It's located on the south side of Oxford Street, west of Wonderland Road, and in the Wonderland Road and Oxford Street West intersection within the primary transit area. It's also along a future bus rapid transit corridor. The site has 2 vacant commercial buildings on the site, which were previously used for the Porsche automobile dealership. The application is a request to add area-specific policies and amend the zoning bylaw to allow for an office, retail, commercial recreation, and automotive use within the existing buildings. There are special provisions that would facilitate the proposed uses and recognize existing conditions. I do want to note that, however, future developments would be subject to standard zoning requirements or additional planning approvals would be required. Therefore, recognizing that the subject site will develop in the future for a mixed use development in a more comprehensive manner under the vision for the transit village place type, the recommended amendments at this time facilitate an appropriate proposal that support the reuse of the existing buildings with uses that are compatible with the surrounding context. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Riley. Any technical questions? See none. I'll move on to the applicant. Is the applicant here?
Yes.
Yes.
Good evening.
Good evening, and just to let you know, you have up to 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll keep this really quick. I think Elena hit everything right off the bat, so I just wanted to thank her for the thorough report, and just want to make sure that everyone is aware this is just for existing conditions. The owner is certainly aware of the future urban transit uses and is interested in redeveloping the lands for higher density mixed use. However, this time we're not really too sure when that will be. So I think this application would permit appropriate uses in this location within the existing building, and hopefully we can get a great development when the time is appropriate. Thanks.
Thank you for those comments. I'd like to now go to the public. If there's anyone here from the public that would like to make comments to this recommendation. I'll ask one more time if there's anyone here from the community that would like to speak to this recommendation. I see and hear none. So I would like to go to committee members to close the public participation meeting. Councillor Hillier, seconded by Councillor Turner.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
And with that, I'd like to go to committee to move, make comments. Councillor Lehman.
I'll move the staff recommendation.
And I'm looking for a seconder. I have in Councillor Lewis. And any comments? Councillor Turner.
Just a quick question with regard to the side yard setback reductions. Recognize it as recognizing the existing use. In residential can recognize and understand the side yard setback needs. In commercial, I'm not quite as sure as what the impact would be in certain circumstances. I don't see an issue here necessarily. I think I'm just kind of looking for thoughts about where that might be impactful on neighbors.
Yeah, if I can go to staff on that, on the setbacks when it comes to commercial.
Through you, Madam Chair, the subject site is within commercial uses all along Oxford Street West. And so looking at the application with regards to the existing setbacks, there have been no previous issues with regards to these setbacks. So staff looked at this and didn't feel that we needed to address specifically the existing interior setbacks, because there is no direct commercial being impacted, if that makes sense.
Councillor Turner?
Yeah, no, thanks. I guess more in general, what's looking to be buffered, I guess, between two commercial entities, or is it more a question of a commercial entity and not so compatible entity when you're looking at what the regulatory side yard setbacks are? If you're putting higher density next to lower density in terms of residential, it might make sense to provide a bit of a buffer in the side yard setback, one for fire protection, two for privacy, those kind of things. In commercial, especially where you've got a commercial strip and there's a lot of commercial uses adjacent to each other, what intent and purpose does those setbacks try to address? And just so that I know that I'm kind of satisfied in general when we're looking at commercial properties and side yard setback reductions, that I'm contemplating what all those neighbor impacts might be.
Ms. Riley, the intent when it comes to commercial with the setbacks in general, what is the intent?
Through the chair, Mike Corby here. I'll try and answer Councillor Turner's question. And I think you're right. It depends on the context of those commercial strips. Old East, a business district commercial corridor is different than a node like this. So in those corridors, reductions in setbacks are quite common. Generally, again, it's still similar things like privacy, shadowing, depending on the land uses on the abutting properties. If you have a consistent street wall of commercial uses, there's not as much to protect against. But given a nodal configuration, if there's a patio or something like that, we might look for a slightly larger setback. But in general, I think you could presume a reduction in setback is somewhat appropriate in a commercial built up area.
Through you, Madam Chair, thank you. That's quite helpful. Appreciate it.
Thank you for the question. And with that, we do have a motion on the floor. If we can proceed to vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Okay, we're moving along. 3.3, which is a public participation meeting for 1420 Hyde Park Road. I'm looking to open the public participation meeting. Councillor Hillier, seconded by Councillor Lewis.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Moving on to staff for a quick verbal on the recommendation that we have in front of us.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is Barb Debert of Planning Implementation. What is before you is an application for an official plan and zoning amendment affecting lands at the southwest corner of Hyde Park Road and South Carriage Road to permit a 4-story apartment building with 74 residential units at a density of 111 units per hectare. The land is in the neighborhood's place type in the London plan, permitting the requested use with a maximum height of 4 stories. And in the 1989 official plan, the lands are designated multifamily medium density residential. permitting the proposed use to a maximum of 75 units per hectare or up to 100 units per hectare with bonusing. Since the London plan is not fully enforced for this site, city staff initiated an amendment to the 89 plan to align the policies with the London plan. In particular, this change was to allow a maximum density of 111 units per hectare and to ensure that the city design policies of the London plan are applied to the site. The recommended zoning bylaw amendment supports the key directions of the London plan, including providing for a compact, contiguous pattern of growth that looks inward and upward, infill and intensification that uses existing services, and ensuring a mix of housing types within neighborhoods. Overall, the proposal satisfies the planning impact analysis of the 1989 official plan and the evaluation criteria for planning and development applications in the London plan. With respect to design, the location and massing of the proposed building are consistent with urban design goals. The building is proposed to be situated close to the intersection of Hyde Park and South Carriage Roads, defining the street edge and encouraging a street-oriented design with ground floor entrances facing the street. Parking is located to the rear of the building, providing adequate separation and opportunities for landscape buffering and screening between the proposed development and the single detached dwellings to the immediate west. A more detailed design will be completed through the site plan approval process. In addition to concerns about the proposed intensity of development, there was a public concern about potential traffic impacts on Prince of Wales Gate north of South Carriage Road. On a preliminary basis, the impacts are expected to be minimal, as the signalized intersection of Hyde Park Road and South Carriage Road provides controlled access for both north and southbound traffic on Hyde Park Road. Overall, the addition of traffic volume from a 74-unit development on South Carriage Road will have a negligible impact and is not an impediment to the proposed development. There was also a concern about the proposed snow storage location and site grading to prevent runoff onto abutting properties. The city, as a standard, requires stormwater flows to be self-contained on site up to the 100-year event and safely conveyed up to the 250-year storm event. Stormwater runoff from the subject lands is not permitted to cause any adverse impacts to adjacent or downstream lands. The location and design of snow storage areas to prevent snow melt onto adjacent properties has been identified in the staff recommendation as a matter to be considered at site plan. There was also a request for an 8-foot high noise barrier along the west property boundary. And I just wanted to indicate that the standard fencing that would be required at the site plan stage would typically be a 6-foot board-on-board fence. We do not require noise barriers between multifamily and single detached properties. The staff recommendation includes an amendment to the 89 official plan to align the policies with the London plan and support a development that is of an appropriate intensity within the existing and planned context of the area. The recommended zoning is a residential R9 zone with special provisions to permit the proposed 74-unit apartment building. Staff is satisfied the recommended amendments are consistent with the provincial policy statement and in conformity with the official plans. Thank you, and staff are available to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Stevert. Any technical questions? See none, I would like to go to the applicant. The applicant is here.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Good evening, staff, council, and public in attendance. My name is Caitlin Crowley, planner with Zelinka Priamo, here representing Hyde Construction, the ownership group of this property. I would first like to thank Barb for her work on this file. I have reviewed the provided staff report, which recommends approval, and through this meeting, we are further hoping for a positive endorsement from Planning Committee as well. There have been a few iterations of the conceptual site plan, and changes have been made to better address staff and agency concerns, comments from the Urban Design Peer Review Panel, and comments from public where possible. We have also had discussions with city staff regarding a memorial feature at this intersection for the Afzal family, and the developer has agreed to work with staff through future planning and design review to provide a memorial landscape and hardscape feature for this purpose. We hope to assist with meeting city staff timelines for this memorial feature and ensure its integration with our proposed development. We understand this plan is conceptual and matters such as lighting, architectural treatment, and further landscape detail, as well as snow storage, as Barb mentioned, will be addressed through the site plan process. We are also planning to construct a future public sidewalk along the south side of South Carriage Road to further connect to the surrounding neighborhood. We are seeking a form of development which is compatible with the London Plan and advances council direction as it relates to the London Plan, and are not seeking any form of bonusing. The proposed zoning bylaw amendment for a residential apartment building on this site is appropriate and well suited and situated for its intersection location, and is intended to be located as close to the intersection as possible and furthest away from the adjoining existing residential development. Thank you for your time and consideration this evening. I will also be here to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Crawley. I'd like to now go to the public. If there's anyone here that would like to speak to this application, please come forward.
Okay. Could I speak, or I'm waiting for your...
Is this Paul?
Yes, this is Paul.
And you'd like to speak to 1420 Hyde Park Road?
Yes.
Yes. Please, thank you for being here. Please identify yourself, your address, if you wish, and you have up to 5 minutes, so please proceed.
Okay. And thank you for the way how my comments were treated. And I have to acknowledge the fact that were all of them considered and discussed in your different committees and specialty groups. Right now, I would like to not to get any more in the one of my main issues regarding the size of the building and the location and the number of levels and everything else. It looks like most of my neighbors are not really affected by this new proposal to be located at the place. So I would concentrate more on my own issues regarding the property on 90 Prince of Wales Gate. Again, one of the main issues was the stormwater, rainwater, snow water, melting snow water, and so on, which were quite adequately addressed in your analysis. I just want to make sure that this issue is not left somehow or forgotten during the development of the site, because we are getting always a lot of water from this lot into our property. And it's visible even on the street, this water. If you drive today on this street, you will see all this water going around on both Prince of Wales and South Carriage Road. All that water is flowing somehow. So please, again, just make sure that this issue is going to be solved properly through right grading, as is mentioned in your document, your report to planning. And another issue which is very important and critical for us as neighbors of this lot is the issue of the fence, which is going to be placed along the west side of the property of the lot. And here I make a special emphasis on the fact that that fence which I'm talking about is not just a sound barrier. It's not only a privacy wall. It's not only a noise wall. It's also a pollution barrier, and more like anything else, it's also a safe wall, because you have parking along this border along this neighborhood on the west side, and it's very dangerous if a younger driver or any driver who had a little more to drink is going to drive into this property over the border of the parking lot. So we insist, and I hope that the city is going to implement a soft sound noise wall barrier, an 8 feet tall barrier, which is going to really provide all these features of the which are supposed to be offered. Sound, privacy, pollution, noise, and safety protection. So this is one of my critical issue, which I would like to be addressed in the next level of amendments of the plan. This wall is your property, border towards west is against our house, and our house is very close to this border by the design or by the shape of the lot where the house was built, and our bedrooms are facing this property, the new property which is going to be developed. And imagine noise, pollution, and everything else is going to be in our windows, in our yard. And I have only, I don't know.
Excuse me, Paul, you're just coming to an end. If you have any other more questions, I just want to let you know that your 5 minutes is come to an end. But if you could wrap it up.
Yeah, I'm quite done. This is what I wanted to ask, to have a special attention paid to this soft sound noise wall barrier.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your attention and for your detailed study of the situation.
Thank you for being here. Is there anyone else that would like to make comments to this recommendation from the public? I'll ask one more time. If there's anyone that would like to speak to this application, please come forward. I see none and I hear none, so I would like to go to committee to close the public participation meeting. Councillor Lehman, seconded by Councillor Turner. And if we can proceed to vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 3-0.
I know we still have quorum, and we do have a early departure in Councillor Hillier, so there's only going to be 4 of us here at committee as we proceed to committee for any comments on this recommendation. Councillor Turner.
Thanks, Madam Chair. This actually looks like a fairly positive development. It's a mid-rise. It's situated right on a corridor on the arterial road. It looks like a lot of thought has been put into the development. I did have one quick question, perhaps for the applicant, is just with respect to the comments from the Urban Design Review Panel. And how those might be incorporated if there was anything of contention within those recommendations.
If I can go to
yep.
Yes, sorry, through you, Madam Chair. This is Caitlin again.
Yeah.
Yes, the urban design peer review panels, they weren't too contentious, nor were they out of the ordinary. A lot of them had to do with the original renderings that we had submitted were more preliminary. And so through the comments, we actually ended up further refining the renderings to be more detailed in nature and to provide kind of different materials and different projections of the building itself, and we located it closer to the intersection than it was originally proposed to be.
Great, thanks. Specifically curious about the ones that are kind of site plan related in terms of landscaping and things like that. If there was any issues with those, if they look pretty straightforward and things that could be well considered through site plan.
Yeah, yes, and we also did increase the landscape buffer around the peripheral of the properties to further increase the amount of space that we had to provide landscaping.
Great, thank you. Just really quickly through you, Madam Chair, the community, I know that developments, especially when they're a little higher density than the neighboring properties, tend to get a bit of attention rather quickly. This one looks sensitive to the neighborhood and provides a bit of an adequate buffer between the lower densities and this property. I think it's well needed. There's some comments in the writings about our consideration of the environment. And I think those are important questions to ask. How does this land in light of Council's declared climate emergency? And one of the ways that this gets reconciled is the fact that that higher density beyond single family homes is probably one of the best ways that we can address the way we use our land, especially in the area that we're looking at. This is it's technically an infill development, but we're not far off from greenfield lands of the city that when we do that, we lose a lot of very productive land just to housing, especially when single family housing is there. So I think this is well considered. I think it's well placed. And also thank you to the applicant for consideration of memorial features to the Aspel family. It's really important. It's one of the first things that when I saw the application, I was like, how are we going to address this part? So that sounds very sensitive and appropriate. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for those comments. And if I could just follow up with the public participation on the two questions that the resident had, which was around the stormwater management and the drainage of the snow melt, and just asking the question if that is going to be mitigated, as well as the plans for the fence on the west side, kind of creating that soft wall, the barrier, the sound barrier wall. What are the plans, if they can be addressed through making that wall safe? And
through you, Madam.
Yeah, thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair. This is Caitlin again. Yes, our servicing report did state that we were able to kind of contain, where possible, all of our stormwater management on site, as that is a requirement of the city. So our grading plans have been preliminarily completed, so we are able to accommodate that. And in terms of the fence along the west property line, we do intend to comply with city standards, and I believe a 6-foot board-on-board fence, as Barb stated, would be considered along the west property line.
Okay, thank you for that. And I am looking to other committee members for comments or a motion. Councillor Lehman?
I'll move the staff recommendation.
And I'm looking for a seconder. Councillor Turner? And I see no other comments. If we can proceed to vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-0.
Committee, and moving on to our last public participation meeting, 3.4.
Or through the chair, sorry, it's Mike Corby here. Before we move on, I'd like to just acknowledge Barb Debert, if you don't mind, and congratulate her on her last planning committee meeting. Barb will be retiring at the end of the month. She's been with us for 30 years. And I just want to acknowledge all her hard work and everything she's done for us and for myself coming up as a young planner. Barb guided me to where I am today. So we all appreciate all her help and support in her time with us. So just big congratulations to Barb, and enjoy your retirement.
Thanks, Barb.
Thank you, Mr. Corby, for letting us know. We will miss you. Barb, I know I've often wanted you were always a great source of information, and congratulations on your retirement. So moving on.
I just wanted to say thank you very much. I did not expect to be acknowledged at Planning Committee. That's very nice. Just wanted to say it's been a privilege to work to help build a great city over the last 30 years and work with a number of really wonderful people. So thanks very much. Thank you. Again, congratulations. Enjoy your retirement. So we're going to move on to 3.4, which is a public participation meeting. I am going to pass the chair to the Vice Chair, Councillor Steve Lehman, to start the public participation meeting, as this is an application in my ward. Councillor Lehman.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll look for a motion to open the PPM. Councillor Hopkins has moved it. Councillor Lewis has seconded. I'll call the vote.
They have to ask because they know it's going to be the longest one, I bet.
Oh, sorry.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-0.
Thank you. And clerk, yes, if my mic's on, then I'll have to make sure that my mic's turned off. Okay, we've have the staff report included in our agenda, but I will go to staff for a brief overview and comments, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Melanie Vivian, Site Development Planner. The presentation for this application can be found starting on page 289 of the added agenda. So this is a zoning bylaw amendment application pertaining to the property municipally addressed as 6756 James Street. Moving on to slide 2 there. The site is located on the north side of James Street in the Lambeth Planning District between Duffield Street and Campbell Street North. The site is rectangular in shape and currently contains an existing residential dwelling, and the lands are surrounded by low-rise residential uses, undeveloped lands, and the Lambeth Public School to the west, as well as a newer subdivision to the north. The proposed development is to facilitate a 2-story, 22-unit cluster townhouse, and that's as shown on slide 3, page 291 of the added agenda, and they're proposing a density of 30 units per hectare. Special provisions are requested to prohibit the use of cluster stacked townhouses and to regulate a minimum front yard depth of 11 meters, a maximum front yard depth of 13 meters, as well as a minimum interior side yard depth of 5.5 meters when a wall of a unit contains windows to habitable rooms. So by regulating that minimum and maximum front yard depth, the existing street wall is maintained. Slide 4 does represent the elevations for the townhouses, noting the 2 stories in height. As you can see in the elevations there, parking on site is going to be provided at 2 spaces per unit, 1 in the garage, 1 in the driveway, as well as visitor parking spaces are proposed. It is worth noting that for this development, only 1.5 spaces per unit are required as per the zoning bylaw. So the lands are located within the neighborhood's place type on a neighborhood connector. And this place type does contemplate a minimum height of 1 story and maximum height of 2 stories. London plan policies also encourage a compact form of development, including intensification. The 1989 official plan permits multiple attached dwellings with residential intensification up to 75 units per hectare. The site is also within the Southwest Area Secondary Plan, and the uses of the 1989 official plan apply, and a maximum of density of 30 units per hectare is contemplated in this area. As such, the policies within the London Plan, 1989 official plan, Southwest Area Secondary Plan support the requested amendment. So through the notice of application public meeting, staff received comments from the public, and concerns have been raised for over-intensification, increased traffic, loss of privacy, decrease in property values, the overall height, the impacts of the development to the existing drainage in the area, and those are just to name a few. Moving on to slide 295 now. So concerns were raised regarding the existing stormwater management within the area as well as traffic. Stormwater management engineering has no concerns with the site being serviced, and is noted that stormwater is to be controlled on site to match pre-development conditions and to ensure no adverse impacts on abutting properties. It is also to be noted that a detailed review of the servicing of the site will be completed through the site plan approval process. With respect to traffic, transportation engineering noted that the proposal does not meet industry standards to warrant a traffic impacts assessment, and the number of units would not exacerbate pre-existing traffic issues in the neighborhood. As such, staff recommend approval of the requested amendment to rezone the subject lands from residential R110 to residential R52 special provision zone. The proposed development is consistent with the PPS, the general intent of the 1989 official plan, London plan policies, as well as the Southwest area secondary plan policies. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Vivian. I'll go to committee and attending councilors for any technical questions. Councilor Van Holst.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Chair. I noted there was a pedestrian crossing to go in at James and Campbell, and I'm wondering if staff can answer when that will be put in, when that will be installed.
Ms. Vivian.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I don't have an exact date. My understanding is it's going to be completed this spring from further correspondence.
Councillor.
Thank you very much. That was one of the concerns I received from a resident who wrote in, and I think that's great. We're putting that in to deal with those concerns. Thank you.
Any other technical questions from committee members? Seeing none, then I would like to go to the applicant. You have 5 minutes to give us a brief overview of your plans on this area.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, Chair, members of committee, staff, and members of the public. My name is Casey Golchicki. I'm a senior planner with Lincoln Preamble Limited, representing the applicant on Domus Developments. I am going to run coattails just off the previous item very quickly and wish Barb a very happy retirement. I've had the pleasure of working with her for about 14 years now, so I wish her all the best in her retirement. And you will be greatly missed at City Hall. With regards to this application before you tonight, we have reviewed the staff report and we are in agreement with the staff recommendation of approval tonight. I want to thank Melanie for her work on this file, as well as Catherine, who handled prior to going on maternity leave, as well as internal staff members who have worked on commenting through the zoning bylaw amendment process. We are aware of some of the comments that have come from the public, and we are looking forward to addressing matters such as stormwater management, landscaping, as well as lighting through the site plan approval process, pending endorsement and approval of the application before you tonight. That being said, I'm joined by Mike Machia from Domus Developments, the applicant, here tonight to address any questions with regards to the proposal from staff or members of the public. And we look forward to some dialogue through tonight's public participation meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Golchicki. And thank you for your kind comments towards Barb. It's nice to see members of development community give their best wishes and past experiences as well. Appreciate that. I will be going to the public now for their comments. We've got a number of people have requested delegation. I'll be giving folks 5 minutes to present. with a 30-second warning, a heads up that to wrap it up, we'll be pretty strict on this, as we have a number of folks that want to speak. We'll ask that you give your name and address if you wish. I'll be taking note of your questions, and I will follow up after everyone's spoken with staff or the applicant to address the questions there. So I will go to the clerk to go to the first speaker.
John D'Orsay, please.
Mr. Dorsey, you are up to bat.
Okay.
You have 5 minutes, and I'll give you a 30-second heads up when you're coming to the end of that. Please go ahead.
Thank you for letting us speak tonight. So it's John Dorsey, address is 6775 James Street. I am basically located across the street from the proposed development just to the south. I think it goes without saying as we start this off is the neighborhood is pretty well aligned, not pretty well, completely aligned to not want this type of development on James Street. I am a London resident, have been so for 25 years. I have 2 companies. I employ multiple people, 200-300 people at this point right now. And so it goes without saying that I have a vested interest in growing our city, and vested interest in creating good places for people to work and live in this city. Probably to kick us off here is it reminds me of a book that I have just finished reading by Adam Grant, and the book is called Think Again. And so what I think we're looking at here is a developer trying to come in and change the fabric of the community. I don't believe it to be the right thing to do in this area. James Street Lambeth is a really unique community in the city. And our street, if you ever walk down our street, we do not have attached garages even on our houses. I think there are 2 or 3 variances of that, but the covenants state that the garages should be in the backyards. So we have setbacks of 4 feet off the side lots and garages in the backyard. And this creates a very unique streetscape. There's lots of children here, obviously with the school right beside this unit in this lot. And so I believe what we're looking at is a developer trying to come in and manipulate a decision that was made decades ago to not sell that land to the school that is completely adjacent to the west. So by approving a site plan amendment to this and changing the zoning, you were basically condoning bad behavior of some sort. And I would like to stand in defiance of this. It does not increase the value of our properties. It does not make our street better. It does not make our traffic better. None of the things are going to get better for any of the neighbors by you trying to increase the density. Now, I understand that we all have to increase density in the London area for different variety of reasons. So this is being done in the Lambeth community directly to the north of this lot. And as you guys probably know, everything from James Street all the way to Pack Road is under development right now. And there's a lot of different areas that increase density. So we are not in a position where you need to increase the density of James Street. It is just simply the wrong thing to do for this neighborhood. I feel bad that somebody bought a piece of land and trying to maximize this dollar value, and that landowner can't build enough units to make it profitable. I feel bad for that, but I don't really care because I don't want you to change the fabric of our community. So I've gone around, talked to every single neighbor, nobody wants this. So my question, I guess, if I have one here, because it's hard for me to ask a question, but how does what you're about to do and try to approve here, how does it actually increase the value of our community? How does it make our lives better? I think you're gonna basically incentivize one person that owns a piece of land that does not live in Lambeth to degrade the value of the rest of our homes and degrade the living experience that the rest of us have here. So I'm not really interested in this going forward. I'd like to know my opportunities to try to stop this. So with that being said, it's not something that we want in this neighborhood. It's not something you'll see any neighbors vote yes on. I feel bad for that, but really what this is a lot that's probably worth 4 different units, and it's as good as that. So if we look at that, I think that's kind of where we're at to start with. So just to wrap it up, I would ask council to think again about approving this land zoning change.
Thank you, Mr. Dorsey, for your comments. I'll go to the clerk for the next speaker.
Jim Posthumous, please.
Mr. Posthumous, you're on deck. I'll remind you, you have 5 minutes, and I will give you a heads up with 30 seconds to go. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. I agree with everything John said. Nobody here wants this, and we felt like at the last meeting, our options weren't even considered. Our concerns at the meeting, we felt didn't go anywhere. And I hope this one goes a little better, that the council, everybody concerned will address some of our concerns that we don't want this. I know things are gonna have to change in some way. We get that. But when the rep from Dumas Construction only appeared to us when John Dorsey asked at the very end if he was even present. When he clicked on, I felt like his demeanor and his body language it was very obvious that he didn't want to be there. We were a bother to him, and that this was almost rubber stamped. And what were we doing with the complaints? And it probably wouldn't happen in your neighborhoods if this was coming to your neighborhood. Nobody wants that. Has anybody ever even come out to this proposed piece of land for development? Has anybody ever come out and looked at it and saw what we're up against? There's so many reasons not to do this, and we've mentioned quite a few already. The kids' safety, traffic congestion, destroying the landscape, just to name a few, and the overcrowding at the school. And someone Vivian just mentioned that there didn't seem to be any traffic concerns, but come here when the school is opening or closing. You can't even move on the streets. They're parked on both sides. The buses can't even get by. The back of this schoolyard now of the proposed lot would be an excellent turning around for the school buses or dropping kids off. But there's problems here that just seem to be rubber stamped. And I wonder if this has already been rubber stamped because we don't seem to be getting anywhere. I could go on, but please just don't ignore our suggestions. Let's come to some middle ground that will work for everyone. And I'm sure we can if we sit down with some members of council or even the builder and just discuss this and see what works for everybody. I could go on about the reasons why not to do this, but in closing, please just don't rubber stamp this project for profit's sake. I know the builder's doing it for profit, and I know City Hall is going to profit from it, from levy fines or levy and all kinds of permit costs and development fees. So please just consider the neighborhood. We have names, we have faces, and we love our community. Not all progress is beneficial, and this isn't one of them. So please have a listen to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Posthumous, for your remarks. I'll go to the clerk for the next speaker.
Jen?
Can I get a last name, clerk?
Jen McNabb?
Yeah.
Ms. McNabb?
Yes.
You're up. You have 5 minutes, and I'll give you a heads up at 30 seconds. Please go ahead.
Thank you, sir. I'm a longtime resident of Lambeth, and I now have kids attending Lambeth Public School. So a lot of my concerns have been voiced by the previous 2 community members, but this is coming from a parent's point of view. My kids are 4 and 6. They're in JK and grade 1 respectively. They attend before and after school care on Beatty Street and are walked to and from the school daily by their adult care provider. In the last 2.5 years, my kids and their provider have had too many close calls with the traffic issues in the area to name, and seen many more close calls. About 2 years ago, the city moved the stop signs from southbound Campbell Street to eastbound James, allowing speeding traffic on Campbell to have a straightaway and to take the left turn onto James way too quickly. This, coupled with the massive area being developed behind the school and the construction vehicles that have come along with it, have made walking to school a potentially life-threatening game of dodge the cars for Lambeth Public School kids. One might ask what the community has done to advocate and bring awareness to the safety issue. To this question, I refer you to the email chain and screenshot I attached to my email submission. We have tried. I personally have tried for 2 years. The emails are to our area counselor in October and November 2020, and then again in September 2021. We have been promised a crossover that is still non-existent. So to answer your question, Councillor Van Holst, it was supposed to be installed this past fall. Why is this relevant to this meeting? Because adding these condos and quite frankly, any more development behind or around the school only adds to the safety issues for our kids. The area behind the property is being rapidly developed with what seems like no consideration as to the traffic impact for Campbell Street and the pedestrians using it. You're wanting to add another 22 condos or households, even more construction traffic, etc., to an area that cannot handle it, which in turn adds to a safety issue that is being ignored by the city. Has anyone on committee actually come to James Street on a school day between 8:40 and 9:05 and then 3:05 and 3:50? It's mayhem. Cars everywhere, speeding construction traffic, kids dodging cars, buses trying to fit down the road, homeowners blocked into their driveways. Adding another 22 units with 2 parking spaces, so 44 cars potentially, to this area will only compound these issues. As the previous community members have said, our school's over capacity. We have 10 portables. Our schoolyard's way too small. The next school coming into the area that was just announced is at least 4 years away. How should this lot be best used? Give it to Lambeth Public School. Give the parents a roundabout drop-off point off Campbell Street to keep traffic flowing and take the traffic away from James. Add the rest of the property to the primary yard and give our kids space to play. Or worst case, make these 1-floor seniors residences. I could go on about many other reasons this should not be approved, such as inconsistency with the area still being on septic, known drainage issues, etc. But for me, my biggest concern is safety. As such, I urge the committee to strongly reconsider this proposal on the basis of safety and capacity. And please, from one parent to many others, do something to keep our kids safe while walking. I guarantee it's only a matter of time before a child is killed. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. McNabb, for your comments. I'll go to the clerk for the next speaker.
Camilla Carperas.
Hi.
Ms. Caparis, you have 5 minutes. I will give you a heads up at 30 seconds. Please go ahead.
My name is Camilla Carpiers and I live at 6742 James Street, so property right next to it. I highly oppose the zoning amendment for this development. So I have my baby with me. James Street is a very quiet and quaint street, and this would significantly change the overall look and feel of the street. Currently, all the homes around are single family dwelling homes with 1 or 2 stories, and each have a beautiful front property along with a decent sized backyard. This plan does not match the street at all, and it would significantly ruin just the whole appearance. Lambeth Public School is directly beside it, and James Street right now is categorized as a school safety zone, and many parents drop off and pick up their kids from school early in the morning and in the afternoon. During these drop-off times, there are so many cars on the street and probably over 200 people walking along the sidewalk. I personally cannot even leave my driveway during these times because there is such a significant reduction in visibility of oncoming traffic. This would totally change also in the winter once the snowfalls accumulate. There is just no way that cars can see pulling in and out while children are walking in and out from school. And according to CAA statistics, 25% of drivers have reported witnessing an accident in a school safety zone, with more than half involving a child. My question is, who and when from the planning committee has come out to observe the morning drop-off and the afternoon drop-off and determine if this development would be a good fit in the neighborhood like this? And if so, I'd like to know what their observations were from that visit. Another really major concern of mine is the stormwater management on this property, along with neighboring properties. So almost already everyone has issues with stormwater buildup on their properties. And I'd like to know what studies have actually been completed to justify that this property can uphold such a development, and have the neighboring properties also been considered. Once the majority of the property will be covered with concrete sidewalks and roads and houses, where is all of this water going to go? My sump pump is already currently working continuously just after a regular rainfall. And if this water gets pushed onto my property or the other adjacent properties, there could be potential damage to my basement, my foundation, my house. Property owners on the street behind on Winterberry already have city installed infiltration drainage beds, and they're already needing to be pumped out on a regular basis. So my question is, who is going to be responsible for the maintenance of the water after a regular storm or after a rainfall? Especially in the early spring months, because right now I'm noticing there's a lot of snow melting and that water is just accumulating. I've sent in pictures with my email, so there's observations that City Council can look at. I'd also like to question, what is the plan for the snow removal for this development? Where is all of this snow going to go? I already know that the school pushes all their snow into one section of the school property, and that already creates a lot of problems for adjoining properties. I'd also like to know, what is the garbage plan for this development? Is each household going to be responsible for putting their garbage out at the end of the driveway, or is there going to be a community disposal bin? And if so, where will that be located on this property? I'd also like to question, who has approved the connection to municipal services on this property? I know many people have already requested it and the city has denied. So I'm just curious as to how this was approved and others weren't able to. And is there even a capacity to allow for more sewage waste at the plant? And if so, is there a possibility to connect the others on the street to that as well? I'd like to just thank everybody reviewing all the concerns. I really do hope they are considered. There is an entire petition that has gone out to the community, and I know that there are a lot of people against it. And like some other people have mentioned, I feel like it's just being swept under the rug. And I really do hope that we are considered. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Carpers, for your comments. I will go to the clerk for our next speaker.
Lisa Grieve.
Ms. Grieve, you're our next speaker. You have 5 minutes, and I will give you 30 seconds heads up when you're coming to that time. Please go ahead.
Thank you. My name's Lisa Grieve, and I'm at 6780 James Street. So on the same side of the road as this proposed change, 2 houses down. So as everyone has stated, I am also very, very opposed to this proposed zoning change. Many of my concerns have been voiced, but I would like to highlight a few again. They're in past notifications we've received in the mail and in our past meeting, there seemed to be a great emphasis on the fact that this was going to be, I think it was 35 potential units, but it's been reduced to 22, as if that was a great concession. However, I would like there to be greater focus on the fact that this is actually going from a 1 unit up to a 22 unit. And I think that change in perspective is very important to keep in mind. I also, and this is something all of us have touched on, it feels like this is purely based on money and that the human side of this decision has completely been ignored. And these are our homes. This is our home. It's our neighborhood. It's our community. And no one proposing this lives in Lambeth. And I understand that infill is a priority with our city, but this particular proposal just simply does not make any sense for where it is being proposed to take place. Particularly, this is something that John brought up with the acres of development happening right by Lambeth. This plot of land to have 22 townhouses put onto it just seems like the most unwise, just so poorly placed when you're putting it in this community, and it does not belong there. And it brings no benefit to our neighborhood. It is simply money to the developer, but to the actual neighborhood in which it's proposed, there is no benefit for the neighborhood. And the final thing I'd like to say is that no one living with the consequences of this decision is in favor of it. And I'd like that to be made very clear, that all of us that will live with the consequences of this, none of us are in favor of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gray, for your comments. I will go to the clerk for next speaker.
Thank you, Acting Chair. There are no other people who pre-registered on the Zoom.
Okay, thank you. I'll just give folks that might have looked to join us today and wanted to make comments another chance to weigh in before I look to the committee to close the public participation meeting. Are there any other speakers that would like to address the committee? I'll go once again to the clerk to confirm that there is no one waiting to speak.
Through you, Mr. Acting Chair, there is no one waiting to speak to this matter.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to committee to make a motion, to look for a motion to close the PPM. Councillor Lewis, a seconder. Councillor Turner, call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-0.
Thank you. There were a couple of questions raised that I will go to staff. I'll start with staff to address, and if needs be, the applicant. First off, stormwater. There's a concern about how water from this development will be handled, given that currently neighbors are experiencing considerable flooding. So I wonder if staff can address that, please.
Through you, Mr. Chair. The stormwater management within the area, the further review of it will be done through the site plan approval process. As mentioned in the staff presentation, the stormwater will be controlled on site to match the pre-development conditions. And this is to help ensure there's no adverse impacts to the abutting properties.
Thank you. Another concern, this might be for the applicant regarding snow removal. Could the applicant maybe speak to that, please? What are plans for handling snow in this area?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Chair, to members of the Planning Committee. While the details of snow storage will be examined at the site plan approval stage, we have allocated areas within the common amenity space, as well as the north end of the site and some of the available boulevards along the internal driveway for snow storage. We will examine snow storage volumes through the site plan approval stage to determine our maximum capacity value. Any snow volume beyond that point, a note will be added to the site plan and the development agreement that any snow beyond what the site is capable of have would be trucked off-site.
Thank you. Another concern raised was handling garbage. Are there plans to have a bin or bins for like a communal garbage disposal and then, you know, picked up from there, or would people be putting their garbage out on the street?
The intended garbage handling for the site would be through private contract with an internal pickup site or a truck picking up internally to the site at the end of the private drive, individual unit driveways throughout the site. So there's no communal bin on site. It'll be in by the individual units at the end of their respective driveways. So not everything will be on James Street. Everything will be at just along internal driveway and picked up by contract through a garbage recycling service.
Okay, thank you. There was a question regarding waste management, but and whether neighbors can join the city sewers, but I think that is a conversation to be had at another time, and I encourage folks to reach out to their counselor and city to you know, further explore that. Those were the list of questions I had. I would like to go to the committee now for any questions or comments that they might have on this particular application. Councillor Turner.
Thanks, Mr. Acting Chair. Just first question is straight through you to staff. In the report from Stormwater and Sewer Engineering, there's a kind of a cryptic, I've listened for it, maybe I missed it, but how are these units going to be connected to sanitary sewer servicing? Is there in the note here, it says the city has been consistent in the message that the outlet for these lands is by way of a possible future sewer extension on James Street to the stub on Campbell that would also benefit the other properties. Lot does not currently have frontage to Campbell. So how is this on a holding provision until that sanitary sewer servicing is in place, or is there going to be direct connection once built?
Ms. Vivian?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, just getting some background information here. Just give me 1 second.
Sure.
And perhaps while Ms. Vivian's doing that, I think the other question that comes from that is, in absence of that, I mean, the expectation isn't that these all go on septic, is it?
Thank you, Councillor.
So through the chair, this is Ashley Ramalou speaking. We can confirm that the sewer on Campbell Street is the outlet for this property, and there is sufficient capacity for it. It may be through that extension. I am being told that no, there is not a holding provision on that, but at site plan, the applicant would have to show the ultimate servicing, whether it is through lands purchased to the east to go directly to Campbell Street, or by building a sewer extension on James Street that would then connect to Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Ramalou. That's for you. Sorry, Mr. Chair. Perhaps to the applicant's representative, what servicing intentions do they have at this time?
If the development were to proceed as per the current land holding arrangement, we would be constructing a new sanitary sewer from Campbell Street down James Street to the site to service these lands. We have been working closely with the Realty Division on timing with regards to the adjacent lands to the east, which are currently under city ownership. we have been with the current owner as well as the previous owner looking to incorporate those lands into this land holding for some time, as it would give us a more comprehensive development, but also give us a better connection for servicing through to Campbell Street. But unfortunately, the timing with regards to the adjacent lands and the desire to develop forward just weren't aligning. So the applicant decided to just proceed, knowing that the sanitary solution is the construction of a new sanitary line from Campbell Street down to the site.
Councillor Turner.
Thank you. Both those answers were very helpful. I'll just provide some comments here. I recognize that when new development happens in a neighborhood, especially those that are entirely single-family residential, something that seems a bit more dense is usually not welcome, and we hear that. And that's tough because the community generally doesn't want change within their neighborhoods. But it's also a very important policy piece this was a comment that I made on a previous application this evening, that we can't continue to build on greenfield lands and think that's sustainable, and we need to find opportunities where we can put gentle density in. And gentle density is a weird term because it doesn't seem so gentle to a lot of people. In this circumstance, the density is below 30 units per hectare, and that's one of the lowest densities we've seen in terms of an infill application in some time. So the number of units here compared to, and a number of the community, as they made their comments, talked about the traffic congestion on James Street associated with the school. And I think that's a really important point. The congestion is associated with the school. 500 students at the school. That's a significant amount that are all coming in by cars. The number of units on this site doesn't really materially contribute in comparison to the massive amount of traffic that's associated with the students and the parents that bring their kids to school by car. So yes, yeah, I absolutely acknowledge there's an issue with the traffic in this area, and I think that's an important point. I think it's really important that strategies be developed to address that traffic, but the impact from that doesn't come from the residential impacts. The impact to that traffic is from outside of the neighborhood. And I think as residents of any street, I think as we come home, if we drive back to our houses, the place that we're probably most cautious is along our own block. That's where we take the time to make sure that we're traveling safely. We know the people in our neighborhoods. We know that people are watching, and we also know, because we know that the impacts of that traffic, especially from those that are crossing through, might be less desirable. So I would say that the residents in this new development would probably be just as cautious as you are as they approach through here. So I'm supportive of the application. I know it sounds like kind of this, I think it's been said a few times in the presenters as a rubber stamp. It's not. These are things that we consider very seriously. But they're also things that we consider upfront. We consider through the official plan, where we try to figure out, and the official plan as it was written had one of the largest community inputs of any official plan in the country. And that's when we kind of set those policies, and it's sometimes a few years later that they have impact in the neighborhood, and so it seems like the neighborhood is powerless and it doesn't have voice into it. A lot of the questions and where we do have impact as neighbors and residents is to take a look at those issues that come up in site plan. So questions were raised about snow storage, about garbage handling, those kind of things. And those are things that we can address. In terms of the density, this is according to our official plans, is well within appropriate densities. And so for that reason, I'm supportive of it. The last speaker mentioned what's in this for our community, nothing. But I would say there's kind of two things in this. One, this isn't, we don't see revenues like profits, anything that that increases our revenues beyond direct cost associated with development charges. Development charges pay for the infrastructure associated with development. And margin doesn't go to the city on that. Where we do see new revenues is associated with new tax revenues. And one of the reasons why increased density is important is because it decreases the per capita contribution required for services, roads, snow plowing, infrastructure. And that helps to decrease the rate at which our taxes increase. And so that's why that's important. When we do new greenfield developments, it's much harder to realize that return. And the impacts are felt citywide and certainly to every homeowner and resident within the city. The second here is, as you just heard from the developer and the applicant, that it sounds like what's going to be required is a James Street spur for sanitary sewer connection. And in a lot of the letters that I've read here and the number of the speakers all mentioned about the opportunity to connect to sanitary sewer servicing hasn't been there and hadn't been a possibility for the residents. With this development, that does become an opportunity. That wasn't there before. So I think there's two benefits to the community. I certainly recognize the concerns with the density on that too. So I want, the reason I'm speaking so long and so much is to say that I was listening. I was listening closely, and I've read closely through the letters, and I understand the frictions behind it. And I hope it doesn't seem like we're a divorced committee just not listening to the community, but we are. But it's also important for us to recognize that the way we've developed the plans are community-led and really with a community focus, even if it doesn't feel like that. So, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I have Chair Hopkins next on the speakers list.
Thank you. And I do have a couple questions that I would like to start off with. But before I do that, I would like to make a comment around the challenges that this neighborhood has experienced when it comes to the traffic on James Street. I've been the councillor of this ward for 7 years, and for 7 years, I have heard of the congestion around the Lambeth Public School. And I was really pleased to hear Councillor Van Hulst ask the question about the crossover, because that has been something that that the community has been asking for the past couple years. And I'm really pleased to see it coming forward in the spring. And the reason that this is important is Lambeth Public School has up to 900 students, teachers. There's only one access to the Lambeth School, which is off at James Street. So everyone lines up on James Street. There's a lot of congestion, and there are very few opportunities. One of the opportunities will be the baseball diamond, which is on the other side of Campbell. In fact, at one time it was used as a parking area for parents to park, and then they could cross over Campbell and walk along the sidewalk to the Lambeth School, taking away the congestion on James Street. With the development to the north, it created a challenge for the crossing over on Campbell Street. So hopefully the crossover gets installed as soon as possible to allow the relief of parking on James Street by the parents and by teachers as well over to the baseball diamond. I think that will really add to alleviating some of the traffic congestion that has been a long-standing issue in this community. And yes, it's great to know that Lambeth is going to be what was acknowledged with getting another school over towards Boswick and Pack Road. And we've got a few years for that to happen, and we do need to have some other opportunity for parents and teachers to park their cars, and I think this is one opportunity. I have a few questions that I've heard from the community that I'd like to ask staff, and my first question is following up on the recommendation around the flooding hazards. And I found it a little challenging to understand what exactly it means, given that there is a concern of water in this area and how it's managed. And I would like to have a better understanding on the flooding impacts in case of a major flood. If this area does have that dry access that people can deal with a 100-year flood. Is my first question.
I'll go to staff on the chair's questions regarding flooding.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. So we did receive comments from the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority. The site is not regulated by them. However, they are currently undergoing conceptual floodline mapping based on the Dingman sub-watershed. That was provided to staff for review. It is noted it's not in force at this time, just conceptual. There was discussions regarding flood-free access. And essentially what that means is, should there be a major flooding event in the area, do these homes have safe, dry access to leave and not be impacted by the flooding? So essentially staff and the UTRCA are satisfied that flood-free access is currently available to the site and will be coming within the next 5 years as Campbell Street North and the future roads of the subdivision are completed.
Chair Hopkins.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Vivian. It's important because the neighborhood sees the water there that's sitting on the ground, and it's good to understand that there is monitoring and there is not a concern there when it comes to that flood-free access to the property. I have a question around the construction access. So we have a school, we have a community that is changing, and construction always adds another layer of challenges. And do we know through you to staff what the construction access is going to look like for the trucks coming in and out of this neighborhood?
I'm not too sure if that's a question for the applicant or staff. Might go to the applicant and see what they have to say about that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, with regards to construction, at this time, our only legal access to a public right-of-way is via James Street. So our anticipated construction vehicle access would be off of James Street. That being said, I recognize that Campbell Street North towards the north end of our property does come within close proximity to our site boundary, and the adjacent lands are owned by the city. I'll throw it out there that potentially through the site plan approval process, a potential secondary construction vehicle access could be installed over city lands to the north end of our property to relieve construction vehicle congestion on James Street. But at this time, given that those lands are not in our ownership, we would be looking to direct our construction vehicles off of James Street unless an alternative solution with staff's acceptance is agreed upon through site plan approval.
Chair Hopkins.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think it is, and I would encourage you to come up with a potential second access, given that there are so many challenges of movement on James Street with the school and then with the construction. I know from many construction developments in the area that the traffic calming and the movement of trucks in and out becomes a challenge for the neighborhood. And I really would encourage the applicant to look at an alternative, if possible, traffic calming even through some challenging times with the construction is really important. I do have one last question around the light pollution, and I'm just going from emails that I've received as well from the community about how the light pollution is going to be dealt with.
I'll go to staff on that one.
Through you, Mr. Chair, through the site plan approval application process, we will be looking for a photometric plan, which will review light cast from any proposed light standards. Through this, we will do a review to ensure that light cast is at a minimal, abutting the property boundaries.
Thank you for that. I really think that is important. I would like to make some comments just following up on light pollution. And one thing with Lambeth and the many developments around this infill application, the Lambeth area is changing, and with that comes a challenge for the neighborhood. They no longer see the skies the way they used to, or they, see more congestion. And it's tough when you see your neighborhood change. Without a doubt, I understand that. But I think it's also important to know that our policies do support this low density. I know I've heard from the community, it is high density. I think, this is an opportunity for us to learn about our policies and what means high and what means low. This intensification is not as high density that it could be. In fact, it is under the 35 units per hectare that is required is going to 30 units per hectare. And I know that doesn't help the community understand these townhouses. The other thing that I think it's really important to note that this does not allow for stacked townhouses. You can go up. This really does, this recommendation only refers to the cluster townhouses, the 22 units that can only be built in this area. Councillor Turner talked about the drainage and, the sanitary servicing and the opportunities for the community to eventually hook in. I think that is really important. This application will hopefully bring that forward for other neighbors to hook into. I just want to just end on the challenges of people in seeing their neighborhoods change. I understand it completely. And it's something that is very difficult to digest sometimes, but it's really important to bring the concerns from the community forward to address them through the site plan process and continue to be involved in this application. I would like to, thank the community for coming out tonight. I know how passionate they are. I know Lambeth residents love their community. There's many things within that community that they don't want to see change, and they've seen a lot of changes. And I understand those concerns. So I'll make those comments. I am glad to see in our recommendation, as well as putting in the boundary landscaping to the north, the east, and the west. That is in the recommendation. That is going to happen, as well as the fencing as well. It doesn't address the challenges of Lambeth School, which is going to continue. The growth, as you can see, all this development all around Lambeth. Sometimes building and we talk a lot here at planning about the need for housing. It is so important, especially affordable housing. But we're always behind the ball sometimes when it comes to that social infrastructure in getting our schools and our roads and our transit. We just seem to be always, a couple years behind. But I am hoping that within time and in understanding how these infills and the use of mixed housing can add to a community, it's going to take us time to understand that, and it's going to take patience and understanding. And I know, you know, for us to maintain all our roads and prevent that sprawl, we need to sort of build a little bit more and intensify to support the infrastructure going forward. So with that, those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Hopkins. I will next go to Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer. And I'm not going to repeat everything that he said, but I know that Councillor Turner does enjoy it when I say I agree with everything that he said. So I do want to thank him for his thoughtful comments on this. I want to pick up on, in particular, the concerns around the school. And I think there are many of us around the council horseshoe and even within city departments that really wish we had direct control over the planning and implementation of where new schools go. I think in many ways it might make everyone's lives, the residents, the city planners, the school board itself, it might make everyone's lives easier, but we don't. That's something that's delegated out to the school board and the trustees and through provincial funding formulas, which I am the first to say are backward and put the cart well ahead of the horse and wait until a school has to be full before it can be built. In fact, not in my ward, but south of my ward, the Summerside Public School is about to open this fall, and already they're having to put in an application for an addition because it's going to open with portables on the lot because they couldn't build it until it was going to be full on day one. That's frustrating, but that's something that we have to talk to our MPPs about, and it's something that we have to work with our school board trustees on. And when I say we, I mean every Londoner, not just members of council, but folks in the community, because you elect the provincial representatives as well. And I think that funding formula is a big part of the reason why schools represent a challenge. They also need to be responsible for their own transportation requirements. When a school is built, it is incumbent on them to accommodate the busing space that they need on site for those students who have to be bused in. I'm delighted to hear a couple of residents mentioned that hundreds of people walk to the school, and that's fantastic. And that's actually what we need a lot more of, because when parents drive their child to school, it is going to create congestion around the school. And I recognize that at Lambeth Elementary School, there's some other challenges in terms of there's not a lot of entry points. The pedestrian crossover that was mentioned, and I don't mean to speak for staff here, but I do want to share with members of the public, I get the frustration in the delay there. I've got a pedestrian walkway in my ward that was supposed to be done in October, and it'll be done sometime in the next couple of months. Unfortunately, sometimes delays happen on these things, and particularly over the last 2 years as we've seen supply chain issues, it has sometimes taken them longer to get completed than we had hoped. So it's not that it's not going to happen, it's just a matter of it is a little slower than perhaps we'd originally projected, but it is coming. And I will echo Councillor Hopkins' comments as well. I live in a neighborhood where change is a reality. I don't have any issue sharing with anybody the fact that on Wavell Street, where I live, we recently lost an entire lane of vehicle traffic because we've gone from 3 lanes to 2 lanes to accommodate bike lanes. And those bike lanes are actually going to provide a connection to 2 elementary schools and our high school and our community center. So it's a good use because it gets those students out of cars and being dropped off and gives them the opportunity to bike to school safely. So I hope that as the pedestrian crossover gets put in place, that parents are involved in their home and school association and engage with the other partners and the other players in terms of your school board trustees. The Middlesex Health Unit will assist with this, as will our own city staff in developing, if you don't already have one in place, a safe and active routes to school plan that encourages people to not drive to school, but get to school by bike and by walking. And it's something that it seems a lot of people are already doing, but hopefully we can get more people doing that as well, and that will help relieve the congestion. Also, and I know people have been in communication with their ward councillor, and Councillor Hopkins certainly expressed her understanding of the challenges there. Sometimes the reality is we need to also use the other tools that are already at our disposal, and it may mean that parking enforcement has to come out and issue tickets to people who are blocking driveways, because you shouldn't have your lane into your own home blocked at the beginning and end of the school day because somebody is picking up their child. They need to respect that space for your entry and exit. So while it's not a fun thing to do, it's something that our parking enforcement folks do have to do from time to time around school zones, because the parking restrictions aren't respected. So I hope that there'll be some follow through with residents if they feel that Councillor Hopkins can assist them in that way too. And I know she will, because she does get back to her residents as quickly as she can. So there are some other options there. I'm not going to, again, like I said, I'm not going to repeat everything Councillor Turner or Councillor Hopkins said, but we have to work within the policy framework that we have, and this fits. And 22 units of townhouse is actually fairly low density compared to what we could be seeing there. So I have to support this application on the planning principles that it meets all the tests that are before us. But I do hope that the residents will continue to work to find ways to address some of the concerns. I've offered a couple tonight, and I hope that there'll be some uptake on that.
Thank you. I'll look for any other further comments. What I'd like to do is hand the chair back to a chair. So I might make a few comments and questions myself.
Thank you, Councillor Lehman. I have the chair, and I have you next.
Thank you. You know, it's a challenge for this committee and for council when we're looking what I think is generally agreed upon, the need for infill, especially when you go into infill, you know, well-established neighborhoods, because it does bring change. There's some aspects of this development that I liked. I like the fact that it's only 2 stories. I like the fact that it was designed with the units on James Street to be more respectful kind of the look of the street, and the fact that most of the development goes alongside either the schoolyard or the city-owned land, although acknowledging the properties at the north side are impacted. I just a question through you, Chair, to staff, just to confirm, there is no access point to the school from Winterberry Drive, is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, just pulling up the map really quickly here. That is correct. Based on the city map that I'm looking at, there's no access to the school other than through Duffield Street off of James Street.
Thank you. You know, and that's concerning to me, because I see, you know, as been mentioned earlier, the problems that folks spoke about tonight. We see a lot of schools. I've got a number of schools in my area that have challenges as more people drive children to school and less walking. There's a lot of cars at the start of the school day and the end. But has helped some to alleviate that is to have multiple access points to the school property. And unfortunately, there is none. I wish Winterberry had been designed so that there was an access point off the north end. I also wish that there was an access point off Campbell Street through this development. Somehow the city could have worked with this developer to access the school property at the north end. That being said, I guess I want to ask staff, through you, Chair, is there anything to preclude the city working with the school board to find, you know, alternative drop-off pickup points or school bus access points on the school or on the city-owned property on the west side of Campbell Street, so children would not have to cross Campbell.
Ms. Vivian?
Madam Chair, I'll take a stab at it. There's nothing to preclude the city from working with the school board on that, but given that we're dealing with an application in front of us for these particular lands, unless we could negotiate a purchase and sale with the existing with the landowner to create a permanent access over to the park, I think we'd be very challenged to come up with something. So in short, I would say it's probably not something that we would be exploring at this time.
I understand that. I was thinking more along kind of the south end of the city-owned land that fronts onto James, so children could be accessing the school. It'd be still along James Street, along the sidewalk, but without cars going along James Street in another area. All I want to know is if there would be anything in your view right now to preclude that option. I'm not saying I'm looking for that to be included in this, but just looking down the road as something to consider.
I am aware, sorry, through you, Madam Chair, I am aware that we are looking to create the permanent extension of Campbell Street north of James Street into the Heathwoods development to the north. So perhaps through that project and through that work, we might be able to look at something, and we can take that back to our colleagues in transportation, have that conversation.
That's great, because that would, in a sense, give another access point. Still utilizing James, but not with vehicles or buses, just to take the pressure off the people living along James Street. And of course, we all want children to have the safest access point as possible. That, and I like the fact that there is a potential to hook up to the city's water system if the sanitation sewers go down James. There are some positives here. So always hard to look at these developments and infill. And I just want to assure, as other councillors have mentioned, to the residents, we look at these very carefully. They're not rubber stamped. But it's at the end of the day, there's the overall city's position on infill, which I think most of us would agree to, looking for ways to reduce the impact on the neighborhood. So I will support this development.
Thank you, Councillor Lehman. And with that, I see no other comments from committee. I would like to get a mover and a seconder for the recommendation. Do we already have that? No, so I'm looking for a motion. Councillor Turner, seconded by Councillor Lewis. And we can proceed to vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 4-0.
And moving on to number 4, items for direction, we have none. Going on to the deferred matters, additional business. I see none. And with that, committee, I am looking for adjournment. Councillor Turner, seconded by Councillor Lehman. Can we do a hand vote? And with that, we are adjourned. Thanks, everyone.